pain is an indicator. It demands to be heard. It demands that we make a change. And if you keep trying to stuff it down, it
Hmm.
will come out in some aspect or every aspect of your life. And so I've learned to ask, what is this teaching me? You never really know what's happened with someone, and especially behind closed doors or in their childhood, or what drove them to be the kind of person they are in the world today. And so not one person that I've ever interviewed has ever just had, I think it would be pretty dull. I'm
I
sorry.
think
That sounds bad, but I mean, if you've never gone through anything that's really challenging, what I think it's life would be pretty boring if it were all the same. It's the ups and downs. It's the downs that make, I mean, I don't ever want anybody to have a down as far down as I went, but it sure makes me appreciate the ups. It makes me appreciate the good moments in life.
I actually think that if somebody, and this happens all the time, people that come into wealth, and wealth is one measure of abundance. It's just the easy one to quantify and keep score of. But people that come into it that haven't had to suffer for it, they
They
squander
don't
it.
value it the same.
Yeah, they squander. I mean, statistically, it's gone. 90 something percent of lottery winners are broke in 10 years or something. And
Can
I
I
don't think
just
it's actually.
share
Yeah,
an
go ahead.
example of that? I was just telling one of my
Hmm.
clients. So I was just sharing before we started interviewing that I took my daughter horseback riding on the beach for her birthday. And she took a friend, and my daughter could not believe how the friend wasn't very grateful. Like I
Hmm.
took them, it was pretty pricey to take a family on the beach horseback riding. And we finished, and my daughter was like, that was so much fun. And the other little girl was like, well, it wasn't that much fun. And, you know, they are very well off. And my daughter was
Hmm.
like, it cost a lot of money to do that sort of thing. And my daughter has seen me build my business from the ground up again, start a whole new career. And she knows, she's 13 and she has her own business. So she works for her money and she saves up money. She values the dollar and the difference to see. I said, Ruby, when you're grateful for things in life, you will go far and people will want to be around you because you value them. And it makes you feel good when someone, not that you have to do things to be valued, but it sure does feel good when you're appreciated. I think that I share my story because I was so broken and in such a dark place and had lost hope. And once I had some hope and knew that I could rise up again and reinvent myself, I thought, if I can do this, then I want to turn my pain to purpose and share it with others that who are struggling. And I know there's a lot of people that are still struggling with things going on in the world right now, things that, their lives have been turned upside down. And for me, when I was 38, my life was completely turned upside down. I mean, I'm sitting here looking out my window and I can see palm trees. And I was at a point in my life where I'm like, I'm living the California dream. I mean, I finally got a good husband after two failed marriages. I've got two healthy daughters. My career was booming. I was sponsored by Nike. I was doing fitness videos. If you walked into Rite Aid or CVS, you would see all these vitamins with a picture of me on the label. And so life was good. And in a blink of an eye, it all changed when I was coming home from work on my motorcycle and I got hit by an SUV. And I was rushed to the hospital. And when I woke up out of a coma over a week later, the first thing I learned was doctor said, we're going to have to amputate your leg. There's really nothing we can do for you. It's basically a war wound. You've only got a 1% chance of saving it. And what I heard was, there's still a chance. There's 1%. Oh, well, then there's still a chance. I said, we have to find a doctor that's willing to save it. And so my husband, when I was in a coma, they wanted to go ahead and amputate it. And he said, no, I want her to wake up with both of her legs. I want that to be her decision. And there was just something inside me. I wanted to to try to fight to keep my leg. And, you know, fitness was my life, it was my livelihood, but I was a former professional dancer. Running was really my therapy. I love to run. I mean, ever since I was a little girl, I set a record in Texas for running the fastest mile. So I thought, I want my leg. And that took 34 surgeries, and it took months in the hospital and thousands of hours of excruciating physical therapy, and they saved it. But then the real journey began, the journey of, you know, being told that I would be wheelchair bound anyway because I was diagnosed with a nerve disease, being told I'd never work again, that I'd be permanently disabled. And then of course also the journey of having to figure out how I was going to love myself, because now I'm deformed. My right leg is ankles fused, my right leg is all scarred up, my calf is in the front of my leg, and I couldn't dance anymore. And for a long time, you know, I went from being so active to laying in a hospital bed with bed sores, having $2.9 million worth of medical expenses and a lien on our house. And so life was really hard, but through a lot of grit and by the grace of God, I was able to, you know, pull up my bootstraps, get through that, and really learn how to be resilient. And the beauty is that we all have that within us. We all have that resilience, and it's just being able to tap into it.
Man, I mean, I knew the story and it still is powerful hearing it. 34 surgeries. It's not like, I mean, I've had I don't know, 3 or 4 surgeries in my life. Like I'm thinking like I broke my ankle. I had to get my pinky reattached, like, you know, things that seem laughably trivial in light of what you're talking about. And they suck. Every one of them sucks. And you
Oh,
did
it was like
34?
it was like going to battle, I swear. It was, I would have a surgery, and then some days I would have a day of recovery, and then I'd go right in for another surgery, or
Mm.
sometimes there would be months in between. So in between those surgeries, I was training my mind, body, and spirit to the best of my ability. I mean, even in the hospital, and yeah, you're right, surgery does suck, by the way. My hair was falling out. I would never knew if I was going to wake up or wake up in pain. And so it was really tough, just the little things that we take for granted, one of those being just being able to use the bathroom on my own. Like, I that was one of my biggest goals, believe it or not, was I don't want to have to use a bedpan. And so I did everything that I could do to get myself stronger. And the doctors thought I was crazy because I was like, I need a pull up bar installed over the hospital bed. And they were like, you want a pull up bar? And I was like, and I need some dumbbells too. And not that I was trying to like be, you know, all strong and muscular. I just knew that if I could keep my upper body strong, then I would still, it would mentally make me feel better too. It would make me feel like I was moving in the right direction. And so I was very thankful that I had a background of being a dancer and an athlete and growing up in Texas, because and having to work hard from the time I was 13 and support myself and be self reliant, because it really developed the grit in me that I needed to get through those times. And, you know, nobody was going to walk for me. If I wanted to walk, I was going to have to do it myself. And that meant just being able to move my leg at first. At first, I thought maybe I was going to be paralyzed because I couldn't even move my leg off the bed. But, you know, there were so many miracles that came into play. You know, I didn't get one infection. I had such an amazing community of doctors, and I had amazing friends and family, and my clients, I needed them more than they needed me because I needed a sense of purpose. And so even in the hospital, I was making calls to clients. And so I think it's really important to share that, you know, although I was self-reliant, I learned the hard way just how much community is so important. And it's been through community that I've been able to get through some of the hardest times, because pain has a way of making you isolate, making you, for me anyway, it did. I didn't want to tell anybody about it. And so it's very important to surround yourself with good people. And I think the more that you're good to people, um, people are good to you.
So I actually have to ask real quick. We have to have our little, Texas bonding moment. Where are you from in Texas?
Oh, Greenville, it's outside of Dallas.
Okay. I'm from
Yeah.
Houston, so.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, and it's a running joke in my family that anytime Texas comes up, I have to stop and talk about it and have our little moment about being from Texas and how great Texas
Because
is.
it is like a thing, isn't it?
It
It's
really
like a
is. It really
bond.
is. And listen, did you hear what you said? You said you named three things that you were grateful for. You said, I'm grateful I was a dancer, I was an athlete, and I was from Texas.
Yeah. See, there you go.
Those are the
It
three things that got you through, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
there is something to be said for it. I mean, I look, I grew up, it's just different. You grow up with different sayings in Texas. And I grew up with sayings like get her done and I'll grow up. And my mom would always say, hide your crazy and be a lady. And some of those things served me well. But then it got to the point where, like, okay, I can't hide my crazy anymore. I got to feel all these feelings, let them out. But yeah, there is something about growing up in Texas that it, you don't mess around. My parents did not mess around. We did not misbehave or the belt came out. And I mean, I love my mama and daddy, and they were just, that's the way they disciplined. And I don't do that with my kids, but you know what? I think they raised me. I didn't have the perfect childhood, but I was loved and I knew how to behave. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this about Texas in my experience. I've lived in four different states, and I've traveled all over the world, and I've never been to a place where what somebody says they're going to do means as much as in Texas. If they say they're going to do
You
something,
are so right.
you can bank on it.
Uh-huh. When I give you my word, it, like, I just got goosebumps because you understand that. And I didn't get that when I first moved to California. I was shocked because
Mhm.
people, and I still am to this day, I still get shocked a little bit sometimes. Actually, my husband and I just we were coming home from the bank, and he asked me if I'd talked to a friend, and he said, that really sucks. They blew you off on your birthday. And I was like, yeah, we were going to go out to dinner. It was like a big thing. Restaurants just opened back up for COVID, and it was our first time out, and they flaked. And even little things as small as that, like making a dinner plan, but when I say I'm going to do something, integrity is a big deal. That's trust, and integrity is like first on my value list. That has to be first. And so I think growing up in Texas, I was taught that. And you did a lot of things on a handshake. And
Mhm.
I kind of learned the hard way through some business deals that went wrong, that not all people are like that.
It's so true. Yeah, I mean, we people that aren't from Texas, I don't want them to feel bad. But then again, what's that saying? We say that's right, you're not from Texas, but Texas wants you anyway, right? That's a
Yeah,
song, I
there you
think.
go.
But no, in seriousness, like I was talking to a guy, a banker 30 minutes ago, like, or maybe an hour ago before we got on. And he said, this is like, first of all, if there's any category of people that dislike work more than bankers, I don't know who they are. I mean, bankers are like, well, I got here at 10 and it's 2 o'clock, so I got to go home. Like, but this banker, he's like, I'm going to have a medical procedure and I should be home around 8 o'clock tonight. But when I get home, I'm going to log on and I'm going to send you that email. Now, any other banker tells me that, and I'm like, whatever. I'm going to have to call him tomorrow and remind him. This guy, I mean, time will tell, but this guy, I believe it because Texas banker is a different kind of banker.
Yeah, it's so true. But I was, the last time I was in Texas, I met my dad. My dad wanted me to meet all his friends, and so we're sitting at this little tiny bar, and all his buddies are there. And I think I sound like I'm from Texas still, but if they didn't, their accents are so thick, they didn't think that
Mm-hmm.
I sounded like I was from Texas. And so they were talking, and they're like, "Where are you from?" They were talking a lot of smack about California. One of the guys had a bumper sticker on his truck that said, "Don't California our Texas." And it was the first time I was in Texas that I was like, but I'm really from here.
Hmm.
Just because I've lived in California for a while. But as soon as I told them, well, I'm actually from California, they're like, oh, because so many people are moving to Texas from California.
And there's so much pride about it. Incident. I mean, this banker, another thing he told me is he goes, one of the things at our bank is he's like, we're a Texan bank that proudly supports Texans. He goes, you don't live here. Why? I have to convince my people to even work with you. And it was only because my holding company that holds all my assets is still a Texas corporation. It's actually the only
Oh,
reason they can even talk to me or work with me potentially. I mean, it's
wow.
crazy. I mean, banks turning away business because you're not from Texas or you're not in Texas.
That's
Like
wild.
crazy, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, I don't want to turn our whole podcast into a Texas love fest or only the Texans will keep listening, but uh,
Yes.
it is. I mean, in all seriousness, though, in business, I think the whole world could learn a lot from Texas about integrity, the strength of your word. And look, I know there's crappy people in Texas. I'm not painting everything with the same brush, but these are things that really matter. So yeah, and like you said, I mean, I don't think it was I think if anything, it was probably a Freudian slip that when you were hearkening to what got you through these hard times, you said it. You're like, I'm from Texas. So
Hmm.
so can you talk a little bit more? I want to hone in. Forgive me. Are you okay if I like dig into your pain a little bit? Like we go to the real hard
You know
stuff?
what? I really want to share as much value I can with anyone who's listening right now who might be struggling with a pain point, whether it's emotional or physical, or financial. I
Hmm.
mean,
Yeah.
it's all pain is pain. And I really, I'm passionate about sharing how I got through those times. So you can ask me anything. I'm an open book, seriously.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, and I'm very interested in the subject of pain and emotional pain, and I was even the things that I'm kind of known for having a pretty obsessive work ethic, and I'm like I drive really hard, and people ask me, try to explain it, and the person there's a guy in my mind I always thank. His name is Andrew. I won't say his last name because I don't want to call him out. He was my childhood bully. He
Mm.
was a guy that filled my life with pain for years as a kid.
Hmm.
And if I ever win an Oscar or a Nobel Prize or anything, and they say who, and I get up and thank people, I'm thanking him first. Probably maybe right after my parents. Because that pain, man, you can transmute it. Napoleon Hill talks about that in Think and Grow Rich about transmutation, of taking
Hmm.
emotional energy and converting it into drive and willpower. So, so take me back to that bed. You're laying there. You talk about the isolating effects of pain. How, I mean, at a deeper level, like peel back a few layers, like what's going through your head to go, statistically, I'm being told by very well-educated doctors, I'm probably going to lose my leg.
Hmm.
It hurts. I'm subjecting myself to this, cut after cut after cut, when frankly, if I would just let them cut the damn thing off, I could have one cut and be done. Like, how are you
Well,
keeping yourself afloat in that space?
first of all, in all transparency, I had no idea that it was going to be 34 surgeries. I was
Mhm.
like, we'll do a couple of surgeries. We'll save it. I had no idea. And it probably, and well, in fact, about a year after they had saved my leg and it was giving me so much pain from this dang nerve disease that's dubbed the suicide disease, I went to my doctor and I said, hey, look, I appreciate all you've done for me. I appreciate all these surgeries you've done and you've saved it. It's a miracle, but I just can't take the pain anymore. I need you to go ahead and cut it off. And he was like, well, we can't do that. You have a nerve disease now. It could make it worse. The pain is here to stay.
Mm,
And that is when I really hit rock bottom. Before that, I was getting through one day at a time, one surgery at a time, and all you really need is a little bit of hope to carry you through. And so when I got my husband found a doctor. He's a lieutenant commander with a highway patrol, and he was used to terms like limb salvage from all the accidents he had seen, and he Googled limb salvage, and he found one doctor that was willing to try to save my leg. And we called people, pulled strings, got me transferred to another hospital. And I remember just having hope, knowing that a doctor said yes. That was a glimmer of hope, so I held on to that. And I remember being in that hospital bed. Dr. Don Wiss wasn't even supposed to be in town until Monday morning, and he comes in the hospital Sunday night, and he's coming in. He doesn't have a white coat on. He's just in his brown blazer, and he had a little name tag on that said D Wiss. And I looked at him and I said, "Oh my gosh." I said, "You're the doctor that's going to save my leg." He said, "Well, we're going to try. We're going to go in there. We're going to clean it all up." And I grabbed onto his hand, and that was just like my glimmer of hope. This guy was going to give me a chance. He was going to be willing to try. And so every day it was just, one surgery at a time, one day at a time. And I don't think I could have made it through those moments if I didn't believe in God. I mean, I've got, I grew up believing in God and going to church, but my faith is a little different now. Although I don't go to church every Sunday, I really pray every morning, every night. And I try not to just pray when I need something. I try
Right.
to pray to be thankful. But I think that having a higher power and kind of turning it over and believing that there was something bigger than me that could take the load off of my mind, and I could just be the best I could do every day, eating the best I could, trying to keep my mindset right. But so much of it had to do with my mindset. And there was a time where I was really spiraling down into a depression. And this may sound really simple, but I remember the moment it shifted for me was when I started writing thank you notes to people who had come to see me in the hospital.
Hmm.
And that shifted my perspective from looking down at my leg and not knowing whether this was the day they were going to amputate it, or thinking about how grateful I was that I had these amazing people that were coming by to support me. I had somebody that was helping take care of my 2-year old. I had incredible nurses. So that gratitude is alchemy, and it really does shift our perspective. It's the quickest and easiest way to start feeling better about your circumstances. And so I carried that over with me. And now I practice gratitude every day. And I say practice because some days it's harder to be grateful when you're really struggling. And I think it's important to have accountability. So I also have, actually, I got sober 5 years ago, and it's my sponsor. I text her every single morning and tell her what I'm grateful for. And I share that I have a sponsor because I want people to know that it wasn't just my mindset. It wasn't just, me trying to grit it out and be strong. Like none of that worked. Um, I started isolating, and my world got really, really small. And I went from being, you talk about a pain point. I was sexually abused as a kid and physically abused and emotionally abused. It was not a safe place to live when my mom remarried my stepdad. And I luckily had an outlet of athleticism and dance. And so I was fueled to go after my dreams, and I couldn't get out of Texas fast enough to go pursue my careers. And that pain point, I had stuffed a lot of those feelings down, and I realized when I was stuck in a hospital bed that holy cow, I didn't have any way to process these feelings. I couldn't run. Running was my therapy. It was my everything. And so things got really bad when I didn't have any tools to process all these feelings. And, I have come from a long line, like a lot of addicts and alcoholics in my family. And I was the one that was like, I'm so different. I'm the fitness girl. I'm the achiever. And lo and behold, I learned when nothing was working for my pain, I started trying to self medicate with wine and started becoming dependent on drinking every day. And luckily, I was like, this is not the life for me. But I felt so alone in my pain. I felt like no one would understand the way that I felt. And you know what? If somebody's listening right now and you're like, well, I don't deal with chronic pain, or I don't have the emotional pain, but you do have pain, I guarantee you there's somebody else out there that's going through something similar. And I think the important thing to know when you're struggling is that you're not alone in the struggle. There is somebody that is going through something similar. Like you shared that you were bullied. There are so many people that have been bullied that they never heal from that, or they may never do anything with their life because they have been beaten down and beaten down. And you just sharing that you were bullied gives them the hope that they can do something with their lives. And so for me, it's like I share that I've been sober for 5 years because I never in a million years thought that I would drink. I was not a partier. I was a go-getter. I was an achiever. And it doesn't matter who you are, what you come from, how old you are, what race you are, anything. It doesn't matter if you're from Texas or not, you can still become addicted to something. And so I think now with COVID and the pandemic, it's like there's been a lot of addiction rates have gone up. And so I share that just so people know that life does get better. I completely transformed my life, but that was really my rock bottom.
Hey, sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to let you know you can get a free copy of my book, The Millionaire Shortcut, which shows you the fastest way to become a millionaire in the new economy. And there's a special link just for this episode in the description. So thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode.
Yeah, it's interesting to see everything that's happened as a result of COVID. COVID doesn't create addiction. It doesn't create abuse. It doesn't create depression. It doesn't create any of those things. But
It
making
just,
people sit at home with themselves
yes, you're
is the
exactly
is
right.
the is the catalyst for those things. Not the catalyst. It's the incubator for those things to bubble up. Those things that we can't when suddenly you can't distract yourself by staying busy. Um,
For
it's
sure.
interesting. Have you heard of the hope experiments? You talked about hope. Have you ever heard about the hope experiments they did at Johns Hopkins?
No,
So
I've got to write that down.
it's a horribly, I mean, it's simple. I'll explain it. But you talk about the power of hope. It's such a cruel experiment. They could never do it now. This was done in the 1950s. And they would put rats in a beaker of water and see how long it took them to drown, see how long it took them to quit swimming. Rats can reasonably tread water until they just get tired and stop. So it took the average rat about 15 minutes to just let himself sink and not try to swim up anymore. But then what they did was they took more rats, and they did it enough times to go, okay, 15 minutes is about the threshold, right? And then they took rats and they put them in the water, had them swim, and at about 14 minutes, they would pluck them out, dry them off, and put them back in the water. So now you have a rat that is swimming and it's tired and it's worn out, but in its mind, it goes, if I just keep this up, they'll rescue me. Because that's what happened last time. So take a wild guess how long a rat that now thinks it's going to be saved, how long it'll swim. Remember, before it was 15 minutes.
Was it forever?
60 hours.
I was going to say, like, wow.
60 hours. So it's whatever that is, 240 times as long when it just thinks it's going to be rescued at some point before it actually can't keep going. So you think about, I think about like times in my life when, even when I was building the business that I have now, Entra, which now is, it's the belle of the ball. It's a great online business. It's booming, and people would love to have it. But there were times when it was brutally hard, and I was posting videos that, would get 7 views and 2 comments, and one of them was a troll. And it's like, is this even work? Is this going anywhere? But it's that the hope, and it was, for me, it was my wife. She was like, Jeff, you know that the world needs this. You know that there's value here. Keep going, because you're the one. She said, you're the one that told me that whoever produces the most value wins. And but it's just incredible. So 240 times more stamina when we think it's going to work out.
Yeah, I think hope is so powerful. I once had somebody that was trying to sell me a product for pain. And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, I would hope that it would work. And she goes, no, you need to take hope out of your vocabulary. That hope is not a good word. I'm like, done. I'm not trying your product because hope is what carried me through some of my darkest days. And it still does. I mean, and being an entrepreneur, it does take a lot of stamina and grit and hope, and it takes encouragement from your loved ones a lot of times because it's not always easy. And people ask me, well, how did you get invited to go speak at that event? I'm like, I spoke at so many coffee shops and free events and networking events and just really a lot of times I think from social media, you don't see it. Just looks like everything's so easy and you're an overnight, best-selling book or whatever. And it's like they don't see the 2 years that it took to write the book. Actually, my audience actually does because I'm pretty authentic with I'm actually probably my husband tells me I'm too authentic. He's like, I can't believe you just shared that or you just posted that. I'm like, what? I like to keep it real. This is how it is some days. It was like one day I shared in a story that I was recording in my closet because it was too loud in the house. And he goes, that looks so unprofessional. I can't believe that you shared that. And I'm like, this is before the pandemic too, when people
Hmm.
weren't necessarily at home. And I'm like, this is how it is as an entrepreneur. You just have to figure things out. You have to be able to be flexible in your ways of thinking about things and be resilient and be creative in ways you do things. And so, yeah, I love that study. Yeah, they would certainly not be able to do that nowadays with the rats, but wow, I never heard of that study.
Yeah, it's incredible. The statistic, it's David Goggins talks about the 40% rule. I'm sure you probably know who that
I
is, the
love
can't hurt
David
me guy.
Goggins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for anybody that doesn't know the 40% rule, it basically says when your body is telling you, and it doesn't have to be just be a physical task. It could be mentally, studying for a test, whatever. When you think that you've hit your absolute limit and you just cannot go further, and scientists have reasonable ways to quantify this. It actually, the body is conditioned to produce that response at roughly 40% of its capacity. So, in the SEALs, to hear Goggins tell it, he's like, when you hit that wall, they say, okay, good. Now you're warmed up. Now
Hmm.
you've got 60% to go.
And I think for me, what really helped me a lot was to, get through a lot of painful moments is growing up an athlete in Texas and running track. And we would condition ourselves and it'd be 100 degrees,
Hmm.
100% humidity. And, you throwing up and the coach would just say off the track to throw up. And then you keep going. And then she'd come pull me out of class and say, we're depending on you to get us to district. She would sit me beside her on the bus on the way to the track meet. Talk about nervous. Man, I was so nervous until the gun would go off and we would start running. Being a dancer, your toes would be bleeding in your point shoes. And the teacher would say, if you want to perform and you want to do this show, then I don't care if your toes are bleeding. I'll find an understudy for you. If you're not willing to do it, I'll find somebody who is. And so I learned a lot about grit and pushing yourself. And I also knew that moving your body produces endorphins. They
Hmm.
combat pain, they make you feel good, they build your confidence. And so I knew that moving my body was like medicine. But for me, it was also, I had to learn to give myself grace and listen to my body because I would push myself until I would be in the emergency room. Once I pushed myself into to where I was septic and I told, I started convulsing at home and I was told my husband, I was like, I don't know what's happening. He rushed me to the ER, dropped me off, and he's so used to being at the hospital, he like barely slowed down. Okay, see you later. Dropped me off at the ER, and they checked me and they said, I said, I think something might be going on with my kidney. Um, my back was hurting. Well, I passed a kidney stone that got lodged, caused an infection, went septic. And they said, if you wouldn't have come in if you would have waited one more day, you would have been dead. So there's a fine line. I learned at that moment, wow, I got to pay attention. I have to listen to my body. Pain is an indicator. It demands to be heard. It demands that we make a change. And if you keep trying to stuff it down, it
Hmm.
will come out in some aspect or every aspect of your life, the way you lead, love, your relationships, the way you parent. And so I've learned to get gritty, and that's got me through a lot. But I've also really learned to ask, what is this teaching me? How can I do better for my body, for my family, for my health, for in every aspect of my life? Because that's something I had to kind of unlearn, was to, stop sucking it up. I had a PhD and suck it up. And it was like, okay, no, what is this teaching me? Start asking questions, asking yourself questions. And like you said earlier, that the pandemic caused a lot of people to have to sit with themselves, which can be
Hmm.
uncomfortable, and it's not easy, but it is possible to get through that stuff. It is possible to still have a life that you've always imagined, even if your circumstances have been narrowed like they were for me. I just went in a different direction and never imagined that I would be sitting here getting to talk with you on a computer. 4 years ago, I didn't even own a computer. I
Hmm.
hand wrote my whole book. So it's like when you have that passion inside you and the support around you, um, I think that there's always a way to move forward and go after your dreams.
You know, one of my favorite quotes. So Blaise Pascal, who was a French mathematician and philosopher, he said, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly alone in a room." And I remember hearing that quote when I was younger and going, okay, so I guess what he's saying is like every, demagogue that starts a war is actually trying to outrun some pain that he can't just sit alone and be with. And so he's got to go, conquer a nation or kill people or whatever. And every serial killer is a guy that, would be way better off if he would just stay home.
Yeah.
But he
Yeah.
can't. He can't sit alone in a room. And it's like, wow, okay. So clearly there is the inverse of that would be that there is great mastery. There is great value in developing excellence at being alone. And I was an only child, so I had a a world in which I could practice that. But I heard that when I was fairly young, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna intentionally get really really good at being alone. And to this day, I think it's something I do, but it is something I observe. Most people are absolutely terrible at being
Mhm.
alone and the lengths that they will go to not have to. And, in my world, as, the founder of Entre Institute and a teacher to thousands of aspiring entrepreneurs or current entrepreneurs, if you cannot be alone, you cannot build a business
Mhm.
because most of the work is fairly inglorious and solitary and unsexy and to what the adrenaline junkies in our world would consider to be extremely boring. But it's like they say, what is it they say? They say, success is hard and failure is hard. You just have to choose when you want it to be hard. It's really easy to fail right now, but then it's really hard after you do. Or
Mhm.
it's really hard to succeed right now, and then life gets really easy after you do. So you just
Mhm.
got to choose when you want it to be hard. But I think for a lot of people, they can't make the right choice because they can't stomach being alone. Do you
Or
s-
they want to do what's easy first, and sometimes doing what's what's hard will make your life easy later, you know?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So you have a podcast, right?
Mhm. I have a
Um,
podcast called True Grit and Grace, and I'd love to have you on the podcast just to share your story of all you've overcome and what you've done to persevere. And I mean, you're amazing.
well, thank you. I would love to be on it. I humbly accept. The reason I was asking is I
You
assume
like
you
how I
enter.
put you on the spot there?
Oh yeah, yeah. I was an easy sell though. Um, Here's the thing. When you have a message, and I believe I have a message that is of value to the world, like you give me a styrofoam cup with a hole in the bottom, and I'll shout out the other side of it. I mean, anything to get the message out there, right, is worth it to me. So I appreciate the invitation. But the reason I ask is, you interview, I assume, entrepreneurs and people that are doing cool stuff in the world on the show. Have you ever interviewed anyone? And I'm asking in the context of myself, having done, between 150 and 200 interviews now. Have you ever interviewed anyone who was really successful who didn't also have a lot of pain in their life?
No, not anyone on my show. Actually, every single person on the show it's all about struggles to success, because I wanted to highlight people and show what they've been through, what they've overcome, and where they are now, but really to show, their definition of what resilience was to them. But to show that I think it's confusing sometimes, like I said earlier, that sometimes people think it looks easy.
Have you read the book 365 Thank Yous?
I have that book.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
My mom gave me that book.
It's a little bit like Hallmarky, feel good, cliche, but it's actually a really powerful book.
Yeah.
The guy writes a thank you letter every day for a year and chronicles all the ways that his life changes. How can the world go get more of this amazingness from you?
Oh, you're so awesome. Thank you again for having me on. You can reach out to me at amberlylago.com, where you can I've got a free downloadable playbook where it will, all the tools that I talk about how to build your resilience. You can get that if you text me at 818-214-7378. Just text me the word grit. And I'm on Instagram at Amberly Lago Motivation. My book is True Grit and Grace, and the podcast is True Grit and Grace, where you'll be able to hear Jeff on there soon. So thank you so much.
If you loved that episode, then you're definitely gonna love this one. Check it out.
I actually took action, and this action wasn't hustling action. It was personal development action. And my life started to shift and change.